What is up, guys? Wraec here with new video, and well, I often get the question, Wraec, I got this really great copy of, let's say, Your Tomb, and well, I also already got an A- stat, and I really want to have an A- Your Tomb. Is it worth using Soul Perfection to upgrade this copy and get my A-? And well, I thought I'll make a guide on this. In the following minutes, you will understand how to see if you have a really good copy, how to upgrade your stats with soul power, how to upgrade your awakening tier, and well, in the end we will even do a make or buy decision for soul perfection or the auction house to decide whether or not you want to go for soul perfection or if it's better to get your copy from the auction house. So there will be timestamps down below, so if you want to check out a certain part of this only, care more about the math, a lot of the stuff that I explain now in the game, I will also later explain again in the math example. If you prefer either way, then choose the timestamp and go for whatever you desire. So the first topic I want to cover are the awakening stats. These are the stats that are on your copy. You can see the attack here, the HP and the speed. You can see two of those are B+, around 4,476 and 44. And then we have one A- stat even with 5,449. And what often confuses people is, well, B+ copies can indeed have A- stat. A- stats, and they can even have two A- stats and still be B+. But why is that the case? When is a stat even A- or a B+? And when is the whole copy B+ or respectively A-? And the answer to that is, well, it all depends on how high the respective stat is for the tier that you see here, or the stat average of your copy is for the entire awakening tier. And there is actually a list where you can check out, well, which stats or which stat ranges are for the respective tier. If you go into the Soul Perfection that we can see right now, and you type on that info symbol, you can see Awaken tier and the tier range. And what we see here for B+ is we have a tier range of 4,400 to 5,399. That means as long as our stat is between those two numbers, it will be shown as B+. And you can see that right here, 4,476, that's well between those two numbers, so it is an B+ stat. For speed, you can always multiply that times 100. There are two hidden digits for speed that you can't see. It's basically 44.2 more numbers, let's say 21 or something like that. And you can't see those two numbers. The only thing that we know it is, well, it's at least 44, and then it's somewhere between 44.00 or 44.99. And this is basically the same. If you multiply that times 100 and we say it's 44, then it's 4400, so it would be also between those two numbers. For the attacks that we see, it's 5,449, and that is above 5,400, so it's in the A- range. If you calculate the stat average for this copy, we will see that it is below 5,399, and in fact between 4,400 and 5,399, which makes the entire tier here B+. And the way you calculate that is you just multiply the awakened speed times 100. We never know the exact speed, sadly. It would be nice if the H showed that here, but they don't. Just multiply this times 100. Sum up all of those stats, divided by 3 because we have 3 stats, and then you can see where you end up. And in this case, you will end up at the B+ tier. So this also explains how a copy with two A- stats can be B+. It just needs to have a third stat that is B+ or even only B tier and low enough to drag down your stat average far enough so that you no longer have an A- copy. The bonus stats, as a little added thing, also depend on your awakening tier. You get one bonus stat at C tier, two bonus stats at B tier, 3 at A tier, and then 4 at S tier, and the respective sub-tiers A- and A+. And so this also means that the higher your copy tier in the end is, the more bonus stats you can get, which is a rather interesting fact. And also how strong your bonus stats are depends on the awakening tier. For the soul perfection, this is mostly a byproduct. Soul perfection, we are mostly looking at awakening tier, awakening stats, but oftentimes when you upgrade your copy, there is a certain interest in it to also acquire bonus stats. For example, wanting to upgrade from B+ to A-, people are mostly looking for Giant Killer or Defier. And when they upgrade from A+ to S, the immunities, Hunter's Focus, Ship Crusher, those are very interesting. So let's now take a look at Soul Perfection. You can find Soul Perfection by clicking this little arrow right in your Awaken info. You will only find this arrow on copies with a B- or higher awakening tier. For copies like C+ and lower, you won't find this arrow here and they won't be able to be enhanced with Soul Perfection, neither will they be able to be sacrificed in Soul Perfection. So once we click this button, we actually enter this little UI here. And there you can, you already saw that we have our basic attributes here. Those are the attributes that we of course want to enhance. We can see our current awakening tier, we can see the merging progress, and we can see how many more bars of merging progress we have to fill up to gain, to get to the point where we can go to the next awakening tier. Below we find the area where we can select material heroes. And we can see our material heroes once we click on them. Every single material hero that we sacrifice will grant us merging progress. As soon as we fill up this bar of merging progress, which requires 310 merging progress, you can see it here. We currently have 0 merging progress. We will gain an amount of stats that is randomly distributed between our existing stats. The stat amount that you gain is not random, it is also displayed in the game, though not very nicely. You can see it here, it is the merging up. It depends on the awakening tier of the copy. Awakened tier for us is B+, so our merging up is 300, meaning for every single bar of merging progress that we fill, we gain 300 stats that are randomly distributed between our basic attributes here. The bars that are displayed below, the 6 more full progress, which is weirdly worded, this means that we will need to fill 6 more bars until we reach the cap amount of stats for B+, which we already saw. For B+, 5,399 stat average. So after filling 6 more bars, we will be at 5,399 stat average. What you should know is that the last bar that we fill might be smaller. Given that we get a random amount of stats rolled during the awakening process, it might not work out to be dividable by the 300 that we just saw. So the amount of stats that we lack till we get to the full stats for a B+ might not be divided by 300. To compensate for that, the last bar on a hero usually requires a smaller merging progress. So this is basically how Soul Perfection works. We will now get into the details on how to upgrade your stats, how to upgrade your awakening tier, and most importantly, how to select the right food to upgrade your hero. So which heroes should you now sacrifice to gain merging progress, and how much merging progress do you even get? Well, to answer this, you can click on this button, the magnifying glass here, and this will bring up this chart. We already talked about the merging up. This is the amount of stats that you gain per bar that you fill. Beyond that, we also see there is basic merging and there is bonus merging, and those are the amounts of merging progress that we gain for sacrificing a copy. So what is important in sacrificing a copy? First of all, our target hero, the hero that we want to enhance, it is important of which awakening tier it is. Then the sacrifice hero, for it, we also have to look at the awakening tier. And then it is important if it is a copy of the same hero or of another hero. So how do we find out the merging progress that we have? So let's say we want to enhance our B+ Yorm Tomb, and we also use a B+ copy of another hero, not Yorm Tomb. So in that case, we will check out the tier of the sacrifice hero, which is B+, and we will see, okay, for B+, we gain basic merging, 68. And in this case, our copy that we sacrifice is B+. That means it has the same awakening tier. And if the awakening tier of your sacrifice hero is the same or higher than the hero you want to enhance, the target hero, then you also gain bonus merging. So in that case, you calculate 68 plus 272, which brings you to 340. So if we sacrifice our B plus sacrifice hero that is not Yom Tomb to our Yom Tomb, this will grant 340 merging progress, and we can see it will fill up 1 bar and a little bit. So this is one example. In the case that our sacrifice hero is B plus and it's a copy of Yom Tomb that we sacrifice to our Yom Tomb, then we also get the 68. We also add the 272 to get to 340, but you can see it down below. We get a 10% bonus. So we add another 34, which are 10% of the 340, to our 340. So we gain 374 merging progress, which, I mean, if you can get copies of the same hero, that is good. Oftentimes this just doesn't work out and it's worth more, or it's easier to just go for the cheapest copies on the market as sacrifice. One thing that you should take away is if you compare the bonus merging to the basic merging, you will see that this is a lot higher and very well worth going for. So if you want to enhance a B plus hero, you will never really do that with B tiers or a B minus. You will always use heroes of the same tier or higher to get this bonus merging. And so the bonus merging is really the key here and is very important. The last thing to consider is, well, we have a B plus, but that doesn't mean we can't use an A minus, for example, to upgrade it. The question is always how much merging progress do you need and how much do you get per copy sacrificed. If the amount of merging progress that we need is, for example, pretty high, in our case we can see it's 6 more bars till full progress. That might mean in the worst case it's 1860 merging progress that we need. So if we only gain 340 of those, we might need up to 6 of this to actually enhance our copy. It might just be cheaper to get an A minus for that, which gives us a little bit of excess points, but that isn't too bad. So if you can get a very cheap A minus, you always have to compare those prices and see which copy is cheaper to get for the merging progress that you get. And sometimes some excess points aren't even that bad, because this will enhance your copy later on after you did an Awakening tier upgrade. So keep that in mind. Check the auction house for prices, compare the prices to your merging progress that you gain, maybe make an Excel sheet or something, and that way you will find the best copies for your enhancement. Okay, how to upgrade your hero stats? Well, we already talked about the mechanics of soul perfection, which heroes to sacrifice. Now you want to upgrade your stats, and well, it would work the way that you see we just described it. The thing is, you are a bit limited on how far you can upgrade your stats, and the limit of this is the stat average of your respective Awakening tier. The Awakening tier of our hero Yom Tomb here is B+, so we are limited by the stat average we just saw. We can only get to the stat average of 5,399 before being required to do an additional sacrifice that we will discuss in the next chapter of this guide. The stats that we gain, well, obviously, once we fill up a bar of merging progress, we gain our 300 stats. They are randomly distributed. We can look at an example of that for now. And in this example here, we see my Nosuke, a very great copy, by the way, I really like it, 6,826 attack, actually upgraded to 6,939. We got an upgrade on the HP here, got quite lucky, I have to say. Most of our, well, not most of our stats, most of our stats still, did it? No, actually, we got most of it in attack, pretty nice. Pretty good upgrade, and as you already heard there, the stat distribution that you get is random, meaning while you get 300 stats for upgrading a B+, those 300 stats are randomly distributed between the 3 stats that you have. So if you have a copy like this, you might, of course, want a higher attack upgrade, but you might just end up with all of it going to speed or a big part of it going to HP or something that you can't influence that. The game just randomly decides where to put them. There is one rule to this, and this rule applies for B tier heroes and above. So not for B minus heroes and below, but B tier heroes and above. And that is that one single stat can't be higher than the sum of the two other stats. So those two, HP and speed together, can't be lower than our attack in this example. And you will see some copies at like C plus tier or B minus tier where this is not the case, but the game will then force you during Soul Perfection to reduce those stats in a certain way that this rule applies again. So you will like no longer gain attack until you reach the point where this rule is then again fulfilled. So this is not that bad. In general, I noticed the game tends to not give you peaks. Most of the time you will get a pretty equal distribution between your stats, and the more you enhance it, the more you go, your copy will develop towards that. It is quite rare that it keeps the attack peak or even enhances that peak. So that again is the way you can enhance your copy. The random distribution is a pretty important thing in it, and you always have to see how far you can upgrade it. As we already saw, 6 bars until we reach the stat average, that is the cap for B+, and then we will need an additional sacrifice. Okay, regarding that additional sacrifice, let's take a look at that copy of the Inosuke now. Actually, this last upgrade that you saw was the upgrade to the cap of B+, so we can no longer enhance that copy now, as described before, and now we need to do this additional sacrifice. First of all, what comes to mind is you see exceeded by 15. This means that this last upgrade that we did actually provided more merging progress than we needed to reach the end of this tier. 50% of that exceeded amount will be reserved, and once we upgrade the Awakening tier, we will get 50% of it basically as merging progress on our copy, as if we had sacrificed another copy for that. Then now we need to do a sacrifice for it to gain a small stat bump and go from B+ to A-. This sacrifice is mandatory. I sometimes get the question if you can just select a big copy or something, throw it on there, and it will just go to A-. It will never go to A-. It will always stop at this point where it says B+ exceeded by X amount, and you have to upgrade to A-. It will always stop here and require you to sacrifice those copies. The copies that we need to sacrifice to go from one Awakening tier to another vary. That means it's different for each Awakening tier. In this case, we need 5 B heroes, 5 B+ heroes, 5 A- heroes, which is quite horribly expensive, I have to say. The value of this is pretty bad. It is one of the worst upgrades, in fact, to go from B+ to A- in terms of upgrade cost per value gained. There are, of course, more expensive upgrades. One horribly expensive upgrade, for example, is the upgrade from S to SS tier, where you are required to sacrifice 4 S tier heroes, I think it was, and a bunch of A tier heroes. I don't quite remember. It's not that important. It's 4 S tier heroes alone are like insane. Absolute madness. So sometimes it's a bit cheaper. I remember the upgrade from A- to A being quite alright. So it's not always that expensive, but this one is, and this one is the reason many people say it's never really worth it to soul perfect a copy from B+ to A-. So keep that in mind if you want to know about those material heroes that we need. There is a way for channel members of mine to do so. I didn't find any graphic to show it. But there is the Awakening Soul Perfection command that you can use in the SSS version of TussiBot that channel members have access to. If you want to have access to that bot as well, or to the additional videos that I make, or just want to support the channel, you can, of course, get a channel membership. I'm always happy to see a new channel member. So if you like the guide, please consider to do so, or just subscribe to the channel. That's cool as well with me. So yeah, you have to do this upgrade now to get from B+ to A-. We can look at an example of an Awakening tier upgrade. It basically looks like the stat upgrade, but you can see in this situation we got from A- to A tier. And this was an LFA at the time where this was really worth it. You gain a small stat upgrade, your stat average goes a bit up. So it's never downgrade, but now you're no longer at the highest stat point for A-, but you are at the lowest stat point for A tier, basically. It's a little bit off from the lowest stat point. Most of the time the small stat upgrade brings you a little bit further away from it, but you're basically as nearly as low as it gets for an A tier. So that is another thing to keep in mind when upgrading your stats. Often when you buy a copy in the auction house that was just randomly rolled, it will have higher stats than the initial upgrade you get of a copy that you just upgrade the Awakening tier of. So if I now go for the auction house and buy an A tier Espen, I might just get better stats than what we see here. Another thing is, I just talked about the Awakening Soul Perfection command. We can see an example of that. I use that now for the S to SS tier. Oh, that's nice. And you can see the break threshold, which is the upper end of the stats. The stat range for S tier, the highest S tier stat that you can get is 8,699. So the stat average of your copy would need to be 8,699 to do this upgrade. Then we have some progress bar things. That's the progress bar XP needed, the merging progress. The stats gain is 60, which is also important. It is way lower than at B+. You always have to keep an eye out for that. The cost for upgrading heroes actually starts to radically rise once you reach B+. And that is mostly achieved through a lower stat gain. Not too much through much higher XP cost. The break requirements, as you can see, as I said, 4 S tiers, and we have 2 A+, 3 A tiers, and 2 A-, which is absolutely ridiculous. And you won't, and in terms of value gained, is actually quite close to the bad ratio that we have for an B+ to A-, just of course with some more digits at the end, because the cost, of course, is much higher. We have like 200,000 for the S tiers alone, and gain pretty minimal value there. Okay, we'll now do some Mars, and I will give you an example of a make or buy decision. So stay tuned for that. If you don't like Mars, well, it will not be Mars. So if you don't like it, I thank you for watching this video. There will be a conclusion at the end if you want to check that out. Timestamps are there. So definitely make sure to check that, but I wholeheartedly recommend you to check out the Master as well. Can be interesting. I will try to not make it too dull. So welcome to the strong ones, to the math part. I hope you like it and it's not too dull. We again see the stats of the Your Tomb copy that we just looked over. I basically wrote this down in this little script. Also wrote down the stats here. You can see the attack 5,449, HP 4,476. And again, we have the speed with 44 point questionary. We already talked about that. The last 2 digits of the speed are hidden. We can't see it. And so we have to assume some value for them to further calculate. The way I approach this is usually we try to find out the value of the copy. So I just assume it's the worst possible with 44.00. Another way to approach this, of course, to say, okay, the highest possible amount is 44.99. The lowest possible amount is 44.00. Subtract the lower amount from the higher amount, divide by 2, add this to the initial 44 point, and you get the average in between, which would be another possible way to approach it, which would be just in the middle, probably a bit closer to what the real amount is. I, for this example, decided to go with the way of choosing the lowest speed. For the stat calculation, we calculate with speed times 100 to bring it on one level with the other stats. It is considered as on one level with the other stats. So if the game, for example, distributes one stat to speed, it will actually be divided by 100 and added as the last digit. It would be just 44.00 speed. If the game distributed one stat to that, it would be 44.01. So we are safe to go with the 100 times multiplied value and go with 4,400. Then we find out the stat total of this copy, which is important. So we just add up all of our stats. I had an extra step in there. That's not nice. It doesn't matter. 14,325 is the stat average. Is the stat total. Then we find out the stat average. Stat average is the stat total divided by 3. So we have 14,325 divided by 3 is 4,775. And if we check out in game, we can again check out our tier ranges, and our Awakened tier is B+. The tier range is 4,000 5,400 to 5,399. So we're just in the middle of that, towards the lower end, which I, by the way, can recommend if you go into the auction house to just see which copy is better. Oftentimes the stat average is rather important and can be quite deceiving, because you see the speed with like something like 8944 and you think, okay, that's a low number, and you tend to look at the higher numbers and then you see maybe a low attack or low HP or something like that and think the stat average is lower. But now, especially in the end game where we have soul power, the stat average dictates how much soul power you can put on a hero. So it's more important than ever, and can be a deciding factor in the value between two copies. So having this in mind and checking this out in the auction house on a regular basis, and not using copies that have a very low stat value just because, or very low stat average just because they have 200 attack more, is something that I would definitely recommend. So now how do we proceed? Again, to upgrade to a minus, we first need to bring the copy to the max stat average for the respective tier. For B+, that's 5,399. We now have to find out how far we are away from max. 5,399 minus 4,775 brings us to 624 stat average that we are away from max. For a calculation, we need the total stats, which we just multiply by 3. And then we end up with 1,872 total stats that we need in any distribution between our three stats to get to the cap of B+. What is required to upgrade? We already saw the 310, 6 more bars. And we have the Awakened tier with the basic merging, bonus merging, and merging up, which I explained in the stat upgrade. 1 merging bar at B+ tier is 310 merging progress. Once we fill the bar, we get 300 stats, merging up, as I said, and they are randomly distributed. We talked about the rule that one single stat can't exceed the sum of both. And now we can calculate the merging progress needed by dividing the required stats through the stat per merging bar. So our stats that we just calculated, 1,872 total stats, how many stat bars would we actually need to fill to get to this level, which will then show us how much merging progress we need. So the answer, 1,872 divided by 300, 6.24. 6.24 is a problem. 6.24 bars. Why is that a problem? Well, the game displayed 6, which means the amount is 6 or lower. And the reason why we now have a wrong value is, well, we assumed the speed at the beginning as 44.00. As it turns out, our speed is much higher. Our speed is a fair bit higher. We can now calculate and find out how much it has to be at least. But we will just not do that. And what we will do instead is, because 6.24 is an impossible value, we will just assume it's 6 full bars, which is the maximum possible value that we could do so. That actually rarely happens, but was the case in this calculation. So I wanted to show you in pinpoint and point out that actually 6.24 is impossible. It will be 6 or below. In the most cases, it works like this. You get 5 full bars if it shows 6, and then there is the last bar, and it is smaller than the maximum. So as we assume with 6 full bars now, what is the required merging progress? Merging progress per bar is 310, so 6 times 310. We need 1,860 merging progress to get our B+ copy to the maximum amount of stats that it can have. So how many hero copies do we need to upgrade to max B+? We again go over the concept here of basic merging and bonus merging. We will always use bonus merging. I didn't factor in the same copy. Most of the time this isn't the case. If you upgrade your tomb, for example, right now it would be this case, but oftentimes, especially if you upgrade it in the intended sense on a rarer copy, on something that many people don't summon, then you won't have access to cheap copies of the same hero, and it will be better to not use them. You should calculate whether or not it's worth it though. Given that it's 10% more merging progress, you have a certain area of pricing that you can use. You can pay more for a copy of the same hero, but as I said, only 10%. If you pay less than 10% more for a copy of the same hero, it is actually worth it. In our example, we now use B+ copies of another hero, which of course gives us 340 merging progress. Then we just calculate in the way we divide the amount of merging progress that we need, the 1860 we calculated before, by 340, and we find out we need 5.47 copies. 5.47 copies obviously again doesn't really work, given that we can't sacrifice half hero copies. So in this case we would sacrifice 6 B+ copies and get some access points. One thing you have to calculate here, of course, is also something I mentioned before. You have to think about whether or not it is worth it to summon 6 B+ copies. 6 B+ copies cost about 3,600 Starry Gems in the current market. Maybe you can get an A- for that. If you can get an A- for less money than those 6 B+, it would actually give us more merging progress. So it would maybe even be worth it if you intend to really upgrade this copy to A-, to go for an A- in that case, but only if you can get it for the right price. And that is something you again have to calculate. You have to think about other copy tiers. Are there other copy tiers that are better suited for what I want to do? Are there copy tiers that are cheaper? Just think about, how can I get 1860 merging progress for the cheapest that is possible? Calculate maybe for B tier with just a regular merging progress. Do that to find that out. In this case, we decided to go with B+ tier, which also looking at the market is probably the best way to go for. As we can't sacrifice 5.47 and 5 would be too low, we need to sacrifice 6 copies, which gives us 2040 merging progress, so we end up with 180 merging progress excess, which we also explained before. 50% of this is conserved for the next awakened tier after we did the upgrade to A-. So 6 copies will be needed. Is the copy now A-? Obviously not, we already talked about that. Again, we see the screenshot of the Inosuke Heroes example. We need 5 B tiers, 5 B+ tiers, 5 A- tier heroes as sacrifice. And then I summed that all up as the total cost. We can see our 5 B tiers from here. We have 5 B+ tiers plus 6 that we need to upgrade the copy to the max max stats. And then we have 5 A-. And I looked at the auction house and I just checked for the buyout price, lowest buyout price at the moment. Of course, if you go for bidding, spend some time, you will get it for less money actually. So I recommend obviously to do that. But for this example, I just looked at the buyout prices, lower buyout prices. 280 was the price for B tier, 600 for B+, 6,000 for A-. The B tiers will cost us 1,400. The B+ 6,600. 3,600 of this for the upgrades to the maximum, and then another 3,000 for the Soul Perfection to the A- stat, and then we have another 30,000 Starry that we need for the A- copies. And then we also have to factor in the base copy that we upgrade, the Tomb that I showed you initially, and I just factored this in with another 1,000 Starry Gems. Obviously, somebody doing a race outside, okay. Obviously, in this case, it is probably a bit of a cheaper copy. I think I bought it for 600, we just say 1,000 here in this example. If we sum this all up, we end up with 39,000 Starry Gems, which is the total cost to do this upgrade, to get this copy as A-. 9.2% of this was for the cost of enhancing the copy to B+, 90.8 for this last upgrade, which shows how insane this last upgrade is. Upgrading a copy from B+ to A-, well, hardly worth it, given that we can get the copies for 10,000 Starry Gems at the moment, which makes this pretty easy for us to decide for what to do, make it or buy it. Well, in this case, we buy it from the auction house because it will be way cheaper. In conclusion, well, Soul Perfection certainly is pretty expensive. But it can be worth it, and the way this is the case is if you can't get the copy in any other way, or if the other ways are more expensive to get it. Well, certainly auction house wouldn't be the most expensive way. Buying a copy in the auction house often ends up being the cheapest way. You have very competitive prices there. You can get good copies, you even can get good rolls. You can see what you buy first, and if the copy is in the auction house, oftentimes it will be better than to go Soul Perfection, or the other way, Soul Awakening Session. In one way, Soul Perfection is the direct competitor to the Soul Awakening Session for copies that you just can't get in the auction house. I show you in the background right now Chaosborn Spirit Gegi, a hero that I think has never been sold at S tier in the auction house. If you want to get one, kind of difficult to buy it there. And in that case, you have the choice between going for Soul Perfection, if you can find a good A+ copy that is, or going for Soul Awakening Session. Soul Awakening Session can be very expensive, very competitive, and has the disadvantage that you don't really know the tier of the copy or the stat distribution of the copy before you summon it. You might end up with low roll attack. On the other hand, there is a small chance you even high roll get an SS tier or an SSS tier from an S core. So keeping that in mind, and the high cost and also the high drain on your account in terms of copies that you need to summon, Soul Perfection can be worth it, even though it's expensive, and you should make or buy decision like the one we just made, or and keep in mind all the things that we just did. For the normal players, I think for most free to play or low spenders, and in the case you want to get an A-, I think the auction house is now very filled. After the last update and with the current influx of B+ cores, if we now check out the auction house, there are actually tons and tons of A tiers in here. We see low price copies. This one is still in bidding and pretty cool, by the way. We can see very cheap heroes coming in there. Those Fairy Queen vessels will sell for basically nothing. We can get an EOS for 6,000, stuff like this. At this point, there's basically no use in making a hero like this in Soul Perfection or Soul Awakening Session. You can just buy it from the auction house. And in that way, actually, I think Soul Perfection is probably more interesting for people wanting to make S tiers than it is for people wanting to make A-. In any way, that's it for my guide for Soul Perfection. I hope you like it. I hope it helped you. I hope it answered the questions that you have. If you are not subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you do. We're still on our way to 10,000 subscribers. I hope we can reach it. Probably not by the end of this year. That, I think, will be pretty close call. But still, it was a good time. It was a pretty good year. I can say that right now. I had fun. Some very great streams, great people. And I think with that, I wish you a good time. I wish you some great festivities for the start of the new year. And I wish you a great day. And we'll see us in the next one.